Hello, good evening, and welcome to my latest video. For those of you who've been following my channel, I've been doing a lot on COVID fairly recently in the last few weeks. I've mainly been um, trying to bring some statistics together and make sense of what's going on with the COVID situation. And as many of you will know, I'm unvaccinated. I recently had COVID, recovered from it, and I'm doing very well, thank you. So I'm not going to talk about COVID today. I'm going to talk about something far more controversial, which could potentially bring up far more hate onto my videos than any of my COVID uh, topics, which I've been discussing recently. And so I'm going to be talking about my thoughts on religion. And I hope that some of you will stick around. I haven't prepared. I've had a few thoughts about what I want to talk about, but if I start to ramble on a bit, I suppose that some of you might vanish. I should declare, first of all, that I'm an atheist. So, obviously, if you're a Christian or a believer and you may feel that you don't want to listen to anything of what I've got to say because it contradicts your own views. But on the other hand, you might stick around and listen to some of my objections to religion. And if you think I've made any mistakes or you've got any arguments of your own which you think could convince me that any religion is real, then you're very welcome to leave a comment. So I'm 57 years old. I've been an atheist since I think about the age of 15, really. I was brought up not in a religious household, but having said that, my mother bought me a Bible, a little black leather Bible with gilt edges on the pages, when I was about, I think, 9 years old. And I found it quite fascinating to read it. And of course, I was going to school, I was going to Church of England school and singing all the hymns, saying all the prayers and everything. And at that kind of age, you're not really mature enough to start questioning whether it's actually real. You assume that it's real because obviously all the adults are telling you that you've got to pray to God. We're singing these beautiful hymns, praising God, etc. You're going to these magnificent churches, and the priest is carrying a cross. The choir boys are singing. There are the holy sacraments, communion, etc. And everybody seems to believe it, more or less. And you think, well, you never really question that it might not be true, especially when you're only 10, 11 years old. But I think that when I got to sort of 14, 15, I had a friend who was the son of a Polishman who'd come to live in this country, and Poles are Catholics. Well, at least those who believe in Jesus Christ are Catholics. So Polish is a Catholic country, and he was a Catholic. This boy, this friend that I had, Jan, his name was, and I think I was about 15, and we were talking about religion, and we were discussing God. And I suddenly said to him, I don't believe in God. And you should have seen the shock on his face. He was really literally shocked and surprised, disappointed too. And he said, "You don't believe in God?" I said, "Well, not really, no." He said, "But why?" I said, "I think they're probably just stories that people made up. Um, we've got evolution, we've got science to explain how the world came to be what it is today, life and everything, and how the universe started." And it really shook him up. That was the first time that I realized that for somebody who's giving up belief in God, uh, they're dumping a lot of baggage immediately. They're dumping everything, all the baggage that comes with belief in God, and people who continue to believe in God are investing in something. They've got an investment, and that investment is life itself. Their whole worldview is tied up with the belief in God, and if they find that challenged, it can cause them trauma, as is the case with my friend, because when I told him I didn't believe in God, me being a good friend of his at the time, and he respected me and everything, it shook him up, because I think that he had some doubts in his own beliefs, and I suppose losing belief in God is actually quite a big thing for a Christian or any believer. And obviously, the more you've invested in your belief in God, the bigger the shock, the more difficult it is going to be to let go. In his case, he was actually a Catholic. He was connected with a denomination, and I wasn't. So I couldn't really call myself. I couldn't really say that I was connected with any denomination as such. I wouldn't really call myself Church of England, and my belief in God had always been fairly sort of casual. I didn't really go to church regularly or anything like that, only with the school. So I didn't really have much invested in my belief in God. And when eventually I said, well, I don't really believe in God, actually, I wasn't losing much at all, because what did I lose? Nothing really. But it's not the case with everybody who gives up a belief in God. There are people who are enmeshed in the Christian culture and societies, and when they give up a belief in God, they lose a lot, particularly if their parents are believers. And I understand that a lot of people whose parents are believers, they've virtually been ostracized by their families over this belief in God, and that's crazy. So I continued to be friends with Jan. We just didn't discuss religion again. I suppose we agreed to disagree. And since that time, I never regained any belief that God does exist. And I probably, in those days, was less sure about why I didn't believe than I am now. And I felt that at that particular time, it was enough for me to say that I didn't believe, because I felt that the Bible was just a collection of stories with no or little basis in fact, which actually is fairly true. Okay, there are real places in the Bible, just as there are real places in the Spider-Man comic. Spider-Man lives in New York. We know that New York exists, but it doesn't mean that Spider-Man exists. And it's the same with the Bible. We know that Bethlehem and Nazareth and Jerusalem and all these biblical places exist. In fact, I've noticed, listening on the internet, that one of the first things that Christians say about the Bible is it's historical and it's factual. Well, to an extent, that's true. There are elements of history in the Bible, and there are many facts in the Bible, place names and that type of thing. We know that the Romans were in Judea. We know that Pontius Pilate existed. We know that Herod existed. We know there are lots of facts in the Bible which are true, but that doesn't mean that everything in the Bible is true. And what I feel about the New Testament, and that a lot of Christians don't really grasp, particularly as they want to see it as a historical document, and it's just not. If I was trying to start a religion now, I would try to write as inspiring a story as possible about an extraordinary central person who is like the shining light of this religion, just in the way that Jesus Christ was. And I would try to write into the story as many amazing things as possible so that people would believe in him. And I would try to present all these amazing things as facts. And I would embed in the story as many verifiable facts as possible, such as that Jerusalem exists and Pontius Pilate existed. And if I was a skillful writer, trying to convince people that Christianity was true, I would do exactly what the evangelists did, the four evangelists who wrote the four Gospels. I would write about miracles. I would give my central character godlike powers. And I would try to create as many witnesses as possible within the tale, exactly in the way that the evangelists have done. For example, in the stories about the resurrection, they invent witnesses. And they're just inventions. It's just a story. It's a story which is purported as fact. And as has been said about the New Testament or the Bible, that the Bible can't be evidence for itself. The Bible is the claim. The Bible makes claims. And you've got to look outside of the Bible to try and support the claims that are made in the Bible. And the evidence just isn't there. No matter how many Christians tell you that Josephus confirms the events of the Bible, it's just not true. No New Testament historian, Christian or otherwise, will claim that Josephus confirms the events of the New Testament, the central event, which is the resurrection. The one event on which the whole of Christianity either stands or falls is the resurrection. There are resurrection stories in the four Gospels. They all differ. But they're just claims. It may well be that Jesus was crucified. Let's accept that that's the case. It's not inconceivable. We know that the Romans crucified people. They crucified people in Palestine and across the whole of the ancient world. It was the one thing that Romans were really good at, in addition to being great warriors and great in battle and conquering people. They were absolutely masters of painful punishments. And we know that they crucified people. And if there was a preacher in Palestine at that time, and people were saying that he was divine, that his authority was above the authority of Pontius Pilate and the Roman Empire, that would anger the Pharisees and the Jewish high priests. They would consider him to be a heretic. And it would also anger the Romans. So he had two groups of people wanting him dead. And yes, it's likely that Jesus was crucified, that there was a Jesus. And in fact, that he was crucified. Yeah, I can entertain that. I don't think that historically we've got enough to back that up, but that doesn't matter. Let's accept that it's true. The resurrection accounts in the four Gospels in no way prove the resurrection as an actual fact. Of course they don't. And the only scholars who argue that the resurrection stories do prove that resurrection actually happened as a fact are Christians. There are no historians. There are Christian historians that don't believe in the resurrection, or at least don't believe that the resurrection stories in the Bible prove that the resurrection happened. But there are no non-Christian historians, of course, that accept, first of all, the Bible as a historical document. It's just not. It's an evangelical text. If you go into the history departments of the great universities of the world, secular great universities of the world, because I appreciate that there are Christian-funded educational institutions where the Bible might be studied as history, which is crazy. But in universities like Oxford and Cambridge, actually universities that are also steeped in Christianity, because you can go to sing the masses at King's College Chapel in Cambridge, and even the universities that are steeped in Christianity, like Oxford and Cambridge, if you go into the historical departments and you speak to the historians there, and you ask them, is the New Testament a historical document? They will say, no, it's not. It's not. It's an evangelical, it's a religious text, in the same way that the Quran is a religious text. It's been written for a purpose, and the purpose is to promote a religion and to encourage people to believe. And of course, for Christians, it's not enough that the New Testament is an inspiring text. If you say, I've heard some Christians say that it's not, that one or two Christians quite fairly have said that for them, the facts of the New Testament are it's less important that it's factual than that it's inspiring. But I think that most Christians would probably think that if the resurrection is not true, then the New Testament is completely worthless, that Christianity is worthless, that it's not true. It's an untrue religion. And this is why so many Christians argue illogically for the historicity of the resurrection. And there are no historians, except for Christian historians, who entertain the truth of the resurrection. The evidence just isn't there. And I mean, the evidence is actually hard enough to find for the existence of Jesus, never mind for the resurrection. And most atheists like myself are prepared to entertain that Jesus did exist and that he was crucified. What we cannot entertain, and what the evidence does not make us entertain, is that he came back from the dead. So I believe that Jesus was crucified. He died and he stayed dead. That he did not rise from the dead. He just died like any other man would die. But that the early Christians eventually, some of them, 30, 40, 50 years after the death of Jesus, there were already followers of Jesus. And there were enough who could see that creating texts would actually be the best way to promote their religion. And it's quite possible that Jesus wasn't quite an inspiring figure. I don't believe he did any miracles, of course, but he may well have been very inspiring to listen to him talk. And he may well have had enough people that loved him to the extent that 30, 40 years later, people still remembered him. And eventually somebody decided to write a gospel. And I think that New Testament scholars have agreed that there is like an original gospel on which the other three are based. I think they call it Q or something like that. I'm not too sure. So I've talked quite a lot about. I've probably talked quite a lot about the New Testament without really saying very much. I think that really all I'm doing is telling you why I don't believe that the New Testament is a reliable document. And sadly, it's the only document which details the life and death of Jesus. And it's not a reliable document. And therefore, Christianity is not a reliable religion. Now, just coming back to another story because people go through life with religion. And like I did, I started believing when I was young. And then at 15, I stopped believing, and I never stopped disbelieving. I still disbelieve. So I haven't come back to religion. Some people do. Some people drift in and out, in and out, in and out. And it's a great news story for the Christian camp when an atheist reverts back to Christianity. It's big news. Why is it such big news? Why is it so important when somebody like A.N. Wilson, who is a scholar and wrote an absolutely fantastic book in the 90s on Jesus, the historical Jesus? It's a brilliant. I bought that book in the 90s, and of course I already disbelieved, but reading A.N. Wilson's book on Jesus was absolutely fantastic. The way that he deconstructed the whole of the New Testament was just mind-blowing. And he did say that when he wrote it, he wasn't an atheist, but he acknowledged that the core tenets of Christianity, such as we find in the Nicene Creed, he did not believe that there was any factual or historical basis to the Nicene Creed, that he was reciting creeds which he knew could not possibly be true. And he wouldn't go so far as to call himself an atheist, but it looked to me in this book he was retreating from Christianity and he was basically debunking the whole thing. It's a brilliant book. I think I've still got it somewhere, but I would recommend it. I know there have been many, many books on Jesus, and quite possibly there are better books than A.N. Wilson's book on Jesus, but he must have gone over to atheism at some stage, because I know that he went to meet Christopher Hitchens. I don't know when, about 15 years ago. And because I was reading this article by A.N. Wilson about 5-6 years ago, and he was saying that him and Christopher Hitchens had lunch together. And Hitchens said to Wilson, so you're not only not a Christian now, you're also an atheist, so no God. And Wilson said, yeah, that's right, I'm an atheist. Now later on, Wilson recanted that, and he reverted back to, I'm not sure whether he reverted back to Christianity, but he definitely went back to God belief, and he said that he found Hitchens' brand of atheism unpalatable, very dry and lacking any heart, and he'd gone back to believing in God. And when I read this, I thought, well, he's not really giving good reasons. I mean, there are many unpalatable things about life, and for me, the most unpalatable thing about life is that we die. I hate the fact that we die. I mean, actually, I had COVID recently, and I went through a little period after that when I could understand why people were prepared to die, because I felt bloody depressed, but I got over it. But I find death a very unpalatable fact of existence. I find it unpalatable that I'm not wealthy. I find it unpalatable that I'm not better looking than I am, and that I haven't got beautiful women swooning at my feet. I mean, I find all these things unpalatable, but they're true. It doesn't make them untrue. The fact that they're unpalatable, they are unfortunately true. And I would have thought that a man of Wilson's intelligence would not say that he found Hitchens' brand of atheism unpalatable, and this is his reason for coming back to God. I found that completely illogical and disappointing, given that Wilson had written such an absolutely brilliant book in the 90s on Jesus. So I must apologize. I mean, for any of you that are still with me at 23 minutes in, I suppose I could go on for quite some time. So I think what I'm going to do is, I've got so much I want to discuss about God. Oh yes, there was one more anecdote I wanted to tell. It's about my stepmother. As my father left my mother when I was about 15 years old, and he divorced my mother and married another woman, and she was in her mid-30s at the time, and I was talking to her about religion, and I said to her, do you believe in God? She said, no, I don't believe in God. I said, why not? She said, well, she said she thinks that she said that she thinks that science explains why the world is the way that it is, and that God's not necessary. She said she's not religious. Fine. I said, well, actually, I'm not either. So anyway, we had that in common. And then fast forward about 10 years, or less than that, can't remember when it was exactly, but she had a child, a boy, my half-brother. And when this boy was about 3 years old, she told me that she'd been going to the local church. And I said to her, really? I said, I thought you didn't believe in God. And she looked at me with an absolute beaming smile and shining eyes. And she says, I was wrong. There is a God. And I said, how do you know? She said, well, I was in bed, last week, and I was just thinking about my son and, how amazing it all is that, I could give birth to him and he's so beautiful. And I just know, there's a God. And I shrugged my shoulders. I said, well, you do surprise me, but, good luck to you. And I just left it, left it at that. So fast forward again. I got divorced last year, and I've not seen her for quite a while. And I saw her I saw her last September. I've not seen her since that time because unfortunately she's had cancer, and because of COVID and everything, she's immunocompromised, and for that reason, it's difficult to see her. It's difficult to see my dad as well because they both live together, and with them both being elderly and vulnerable to COVID, it's not really been possible to see them. But anyway, when I did see her in September 2021, that was the last time. I said to her, do you still believe in God? And she looked at me and she said, no, really kind of scornfully and dismissively. I said, no, really? And she shook her head. She said, it's just fairy stories. And I said, you do realize that 14 years ago, you told me that you were lying in bed. Thomas had been born. That's my half brother, and he was so beautiful and amazing, and you were just full of love, and you just knew that God existed. And she just waved her hand again. She said, "Well, I was wrong," and I said, "Well, I'm staggered," and I said, "But having said that, I'm an atheist too, so." Welcome to reality. So, especially with her being in her mid-70s, because you tend to think that the older that people get, the more scared of death that they get. I mean, I'm 57, and I'm starting to think about, how long have I got left? And, you start thinking that it's quite scary that when you're dead, it's like turning off the lights forever. And you could see that if you did have a real, genuine belief that there's an afterlife, it might be of some value to you, but it's a dubious kind of value because it's got absolutely no evidence to back it up. And it's like somebody said that if you were 10 years old and somebody said, there's 10 million pounds in the bank, and when you're 18, you'll get that money and your life will be fantastic. And then when you get to 18 and you find out there's no money there, you've been lied to, but you were happy while you believed it was there. What would you rather have, the happiness in that false belief? Or would you rather know the truth? And I suppose I'd rather have the truth because obviously if I believed there was 10 million pounds waiting for me when I was 18, I might not work hard at school. I might not try to make the best of my opportunities. And so that false belief would really ruin my life. And maybe with belief in the afterlife, it's the same thing, that if you believe it might give you some kind of comfort to believe you're going to see all your friends, people who've died, etc. It might give you some kind of comfort, but if there's no evidence to back it up, if in all likelihood it's not true, what's the point in believing it? So anyway, look, I've rambled on for far too long. If you want to discuss this with me, whether you're a Christian, a believer, or a non-believer, I respect all your views. Keep it civilized. Make some comments if you want, and I'll come back probably tomorrow night and add some more to this, because I've got a lot more to say about religion. I've just scratched the surface, really. So anyway, look forward to seeing you next time.